The shop had stood on the same corner for 97 years. 3 generations of Vances had worked within its walls, their hands passing over gears and springs and tiny screws, keeping time alive in a world that had forgotten how to listen. Silas Vance was the third. At 68, his hands still moved with the precision of a surgeon, though the knuckles had begun to ache on cold mornings. His hair had gone white years ago, but his eyes were still sharp, still patient, still capable of seeing the thing that others missed, Vance and Son clockmakers. That was what the sign above the door said. The and Son had referred to Silas's father, then to Silas himself, and now, in theory, to Leo. Silas set down his loop and looked across the workshop. His son was 34 years old, tall and broad, shouldered with his mother's gentle smile and his father's steady hands. He had been a good apprentice, a good son. He had learned the trade with patience and care, and Silas had dreamed of passing the shop to him when the time came. That was before Bianca. Bianca Delacroix had entered their lives 2 years ago, and nothing had been the same since. She was beautiful in the way that expensive things are beautiful, polished, precise, and utterly without warmth. A real estate lawyer with a reputation for winning, she had swept into Leo's life like a hurricane and left Silas standing in the wreckage. Silas had tried to like her. He had invited her to Sunday dinners. He had shown her the shop's history. The antique clocks from Vienna, the grandfather clocks from London, the handwritten ledgers from his great-grandfather's time. He had watched her eyes move across the room and seen something that made his blood run cold. She was not looking at the clocks. She was looking at the walls, the ceiling, the foundation. She was calculating. Beautiful building. Bianca had said that first evening, running her fingers along the exposed brick. Prime location. Do you own it outright, Silas? The shop and the building, he had replied. Free and clear, 3 generations. Bianca had smiled. It was a smile that did not reach her eyes. And Leo tells me you don't have a will. The question had hung in the air like smoke. Silas had looked at his son, at Leo, who suddenly could not meet his gaze, and felt something shift in his chest. I have a will, Silas said carefully. It leaves everything to Leo. Everything? Bianca's eyebrows rose. The building, the inventory, the intellectual property. It is a clock shop, Silas said. There is no intellectual property. Bianca had laughed then, a light, musical sound that fooled. No one. But Silas had seen it. The calculation behind the smile, the hunger behind the eyes. Bianca had not married Leo for love. She had married him for the building, for the land, for the fortune that lay hidden beneath 3 generations of clockmaking. And Leo, poor blind Leo, could not see it. That night, after Bianca had left, Silas sat alone in the workshop. The clocks ticked around him, dozens of them, hundreds of them, a symphony of seconds that had marked every moment of his life. He looked at the old photographs on the wall, his father, his grandfather, his wife, Eleanor, whose smile had been the only thing in this world that could match the ticking of the clocks. Eleanor, he whispered. What do I do? The clocks did not answer, but one of them, the oldest one, the one that sat on the mantel above the fireplace, seemed to tick a little louder. 1920s Patek Philippe desk clock. Eleanor's favorite, the one she had restored with her own hands, in the final months of her life. Silas walked to the mantel and picked it up. The clock was warm in his hands, alive with the heartbeat of its mechanism. He turned it over, ran his fingers along the brass casing, and remembered. This clock will tell you when it is time to protect our home, Eleanor had said. He had not understood then. He was beginning to understand now. The changes came slowly at first. A missed dinner here, a cancelled appointment there. Bianca was always apologetic, always charming, always just plausible enough that Silas could not quite pin down what was happening. Dad, Bianca thinks you are working too hard, Leo said one evening, standing in the doorway of the workshop. She says the dust is bad for your lungs. She thinks you should consider retiring. Silas looked up from the pocket watch he was repairing. Retiring? Just cutting back. Maybe selling the shop, moving somewhere smaller. Somewhere smaller, Silas repeated. He set down his tools. Leo, this shop has been in our family for 97 years. Your great-grandfather built it. Your grandfather expanded it. Your mother, his voice caught. Your mother loved this shop. Leo shifted uncomfortably. I know, Dad, but Bianca has a point. You are not getting any younger. And the building is worth a fortune. We could sell it, invest the money, and you could live comfortably for the rest of your life. And the shop? Leo looked away. Maybe it is time to let it go. Silas felt the words like a physical blow. He looked at his son. This man he had raised, this boy he had taught to hold a screwdriver before he could hold a pencil, and saw a stranger looking back. Bianca put you up to this, Silas said. She is my wife, Dad. She wants what is best for us. She wants what is best for herself. Leo's jaw tightened. That is not fair. Fair. Silas stood up. His knees ached. His hands trembled. But his voice was steady. I'll tell you what is not fair. It is not fair that my own son can't see what is standing right in front of him. Leo opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. He looked at the clocks, at the photographs, at the worn wooden bench where his mother had once sat. Bianca is not the enemy, Leo said finally. Silas said nothing. He simply picked up his loop and returned to his work. Leo stood there for a long moment. Then he turned and walked out. The door closed behind him. The clocks kept ticking. The first hint came from Henry, Silas's assistant of 20 years. Henry was a quiet man, almost invisible, with the kind of face that people forgot the moment they looked away. He had worked in the shop since he was a boy, learning the trade from Silas, and he had never once given cause for concern. But one morning, Henry pulled Silas aside. Mr. Vance, he said, his voice low, I need to tell you something. Silas set down his coffee. What is it? Mrs. Vance, Bianca. She has been coming to the shop when you are not here. Silas felt a chill run down his spine. Coming here? When? The property deeds, the insurance documents. She takes pictures with her phone. Henry's face was troubled. The workshop spun around him. The clocks, the tools, the photographs, all of it suddenly unstable, like a house built on sand. Thank you, Henry, he said. I'll handle it. That afternoon, Silas called an old friend. Agent Miller had retired from the FBI 5 years ago. He was a lean man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. He had worked white, collar crime for most of his career. Fraud, embezzlement, inheritance theft. He knew the patterns. He knew the players. And he owed Silas a debt from a case 20 years ago that Silas had helped him solve. I need you to look into someone, Silas said. Miller nodded. Who? Bianca Vance, my daughter-in-law. Miller did not ask why. He simply took the information and promised to call within a week. The report arrived in 6 days. Silas read it in the workshop alone, while the clocks ticked around him. The pages were dense with names and dates and legal citations, but the story they told was simple and devastating. Bianca Delacroix had been married before. Twice, in fact. Both marriages had ended in death. First a car accident, then a sudden illness. Both times, Bianca had inherited everything. Both times there had been questions that were never answered. And now, she was making inquiries. Insurance agents had been contacted. Real estate developers had been approached. A demolition permit had been filed for the building, pending Silas's incapacity or death. But seeing it in black and white, seeing the evidence of his daughter, in-laws' greed and cruelty, was something else entirely. She was not just trying to take the building. She was trying to take his life. And Leo Poor, Blind, trusting Leo was standing right beside her. That night, Silas could not sleep. He walked through the dark house, past the empty rooms, past the photographs of Eleanor, past the memories of a life that had once been whole. He ended up in the workshop, standing before the mantel, looking at the Patek Philippe desk clock. His wife's clock. Eleanor had been a watchmaker herself before the cancer had taken her. She had been better than Silas, in some ways, more patient, more precise, more willing to sit with a problem until it yielded its secrets. In her final months, when she could no longer leave the house, she had asked Silas to bring her the clock. The old one, she had said. The 1920s Patek. I want to restore it. He had watched her work, her thin fingers moving with a grace that seemed impossible given her weakness. She had taken the clock apart piece by piece, cleaning each gear, each spring, each jewel. She had reassembled it with care, adjusting the escapement, regulating the balance wheel, bringing it back to life. And then, when she was finished, she had handed it to Silas. "This clock will tell you when it is time to protect our home," she had said. Silas had thought she was speaking metaphorically. The clock would mark the hours. It would remind him of her. It would be a witness to his grief. He had not understood. He understood now. He picked up the clock and turned it over in his hands. The brass casing was warm, almost alive. He ran his fingers along the bottom, feeling the seams, the joints, the tiny imperfections that only a watchmaker would notice. And then he found it. A catch. Almost invisible. Hidden beneath the felt padding. Silas pressed it. The bottom of the clock slid open. Inside was a compartment. Small, precise, deliberately hidden. My dearest Silas, if you are reading this, then the time has come. I am sorry. I had hoped you would never need to know. I met Bianca Delacroix before you did. Before Leo did. It was 3 years ago, at a legal conference in the city. I was consulting on a case involving antique timepieces. A small matter, nothing important, but Bianca was there, and I saw what she was. She approached me after the panel. She asked about the shop, about the building, about our assets. She was charming, polished, and utterly without conscience. I did some digging. I found the records of her previous marriages. I found the questions that were never answered. I tried to warn you. I tried to tell you, but the cancer was already taking me, and I could not find the words, so I hid the evidence here, in the clock, where only you would think to look. Silas, Bianca is dangerous. She will try to take everything. She will try to isolate Leo. She will try to make you seem old, or confused, or incompetent. Do not let her. You are stronger than you know, and you are not alone. The shop is not just a building. It is our legacy. It is our family. Protect it. With all my love, Eleanor. Silas read the letter 3 times. Then he set it down and opened the folder. Inside were documents, newspaper clippings, court records, photographs, evidence of Bianca's past, the suspicious deaths, the forged signatures, the coerced wills. Everything Eleanor had gathered, hidden away, waiting for the moment when it would be needed. Silas looked at the clock. The hands moved steadily, marking the seconds, marking the minutes, marking the hours. Eleanor had known. 10 years ago, she had known what Bianca would do, and she had prepared. The clock had told him. It was time to protect his home. Silas waited 3 weeks. He did not confront Bianca. He did not argue with Leo. He simply watched and waited and prepared. He met with a lawyer. He secured the building's title. He filed a restraining order against Bianca's contacts at the insurance company and the development firm. He made copies of the evidence. The report from Agent Miller, the documents from Eleanor's folder, the photographs of Bianca going through his desk. And then, on a Friday evening, he invited Leo and Bianca to dinner. "The retirement dinner?" Silas said when he called. "I've been thinking about what you said, Leo. Maybe it is time to talk about the future." Leo sounded relieved. Bianca sounded triumphant. They arrived at 7 o'clock. Bianca was wearing a red dress, expensive and confident. She carried a bottle of champagne, already open, already poured into 2 glasses. "Silas," she said, kissing his cheek. "I am so glad you've come around. This is going to be wonderful." Silas smiled. It was a thin smile, a careful smile, but Bianca did not notice. She was already looking past him, at the shop, at the building, at the fortune she was about to inherit. They sat down at the dining table. Silas had prepared a simple meal, roast chicken, vegetables, bread. Nothing fancy, nothing that would distract. Bianca poured the champagne. She raised her glass. "To new beginnings," she said. Leo raised his glass. "To new beginnings." Silas did not raise his. "I have something to show you," he said. He stood up and walked to the mantel. He picked up the Patek Philippe desk clock, the witness, the guardian, the keeper of secrets, and carried it to the table. Bianca's smile faltered. "What is that?" Bianca shook her head. She said, "This clock will tell you when it is time to protect our home." Silas turned the clock over. "I didn't understand at first, but I understand now." He pressed the hidden catch. The bottom of the clock slid open. Bianca went pale. Silas reached into the compartment and pulled out the folder. He placed it on the table between them. "Do you know what this is, Bianca?" Bianca said nothing. "This is evidence," Silas said. "Evidence of your past. 2 dead husbands, forged signatures, coerced wills, and more recently," he pulled out the report from Agent Miller. "Evidence of your plans for this building, the insurance inquiries, the developer contacts, the demolition permit." Leo stared at his wife. "Bianca, what is he talking about?" Bianca's face had gone from He is confused. "Am I?" Silas pulled out another document. "This is a photograph of you going through my desk at midnight. This is a copy of the emails you sent to the developer. And this," he pulled out Eleanor's letter, "is a letter my wife wrote 10 years ago, predicting exactly what you would do." He handed the letter to Leo. Leo read it. His face changed as he read, confusion first, then disbelief, then horror. When he looked up at Bianca, his eyes were wet. "Is this true?" he whispered. Bianca stood up. Her chair scraped against the floor. "I am not listening to this. I am leaving." "You are not going anywhere," Silas said. His voice was calm, steady, the voice of a man who had spent 68 years learning patience. "The police are outside. Agent Miller is waiting. They have copies of every document in this folder." Bianca froze. "You wouldn't." "I would," Silas said. "And I have." The front door opened, 2 officers walked in. Behind them came Agent Miller, his face impassive. Bianca screamed. She shouted. She cursed. She called Silas names that made Leo flinch. But she did not escape. The officers led her out. The door closed behind her. And then there was silence. Leo sat at the table for a long time after Bianca was gone. His hands were folded in front of him. His face was pale. He looked like a man who had just discovered that the ground beneath his feet was made of glass. "Dad," he said finally, "I didn't know." Silas sat down across from him. "I know. I thought she loved me. I know. I almost lost you. I almost lost everything." Silas reached across the table and took his son's hand. "You didn't lose anything, Leo. You learned something, and learning is never a loss." Leo looked at the clock, the Patek Philippe, still sitting on the table, its hands moving steadily forward. "Mom knew," he said, "all along." They sat in silence for a while. The clocks ticked around them, the grandfather clock from Vienna, the mantle clock from London, the cuckoo clock from the Black Forest, a symphony of seconds marking the passage of time, witnessing the healing of a family. "I want to learn," Leo said finally. "I mean really learn, the way you learned, the way grandfather learned." I want to understand what this shop means." Silas smiled. It was the first real smile he had smiled in months. "Then we'll start tomorrow," he said. "There is a pocket watch on the workbench. It needs a new balance staff. I'll show you how." Leo nodded. He wiped his eyes. He stood up and walked to the mantel, where the photograph of his mother sat among the clocks. "I am sorry, Mom," he whispered. The clocks ticked on. 6 months later, the shop was still standing. Bianca's trial had been swift and unremarkable. The evidence was overwhelming. She was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 12 years in prison. The insurance company and the developer had both withdrawn their interest, citing internal investigations. Leo had moved back into the house above the shop. He woke every morning at 6, made coffee, and walked downstairs to the workshop. He was learning slowly, patiently. He was learning. Silas watched him with quiet pride. The boy's hands were steady now. His eyes were sharp. He was beginning to understand that a clock was not just a machine, it was a story, a record of time, a witness to the lives it had measured. On the first anniversary of Eleanor's letter, Silas took the Patek Philippe down from the mantel. He wound it carefully, feeling the resistance of the mainspring, the smoothness of the gears. He set the time and placed it back on the mantel. The clock began to tick. The sound filled the workshop, steady, certain, unafraid. Silas looked at the photograph of Eleanor. He thought of her hands, thin and trembling, restoring this clock in the final months of her life. He thought of her letter, hidden away, waiting for the moment when it would be needed. She had known, she had prepared, and the clock had witnessed it all. "Thank you," Silas whispered. The clock ticked on, and in the workshop below, Leo Vance held a tiny screwdriver in his steady hands, repairing a pocket watch that had belonged to his great-grandfather, learning the art of time, learning the value of legacy, learning what it meant to be a Vance. The shop had survived. The family had survived, and time, as it always did, had told the truth.